Now, this originally started as a presentation regarding Carriergrade NAT by Neil from BT, but we expanded out on that a little bit to set up a panel discussion, and we are delighted to have representatives from BSkyB and Virgin Media to join that panel as well. To introduce the panel, we have on my far left Daryl Tanner from Virgin Media, to his right Ian Dickinson from BSkyB, and Neil McKay from BT. Now, something that I think we often see raised, especially when V6 is concerned, is why hasn't V6 just been enabled when a lot of small ISPs have certainly been there and done that. We have to think about scale. Now, if we look at in terms of number of subscribers, when we talk about Virgin Media, we're talking about 4.2 million subscribers, 4.2 million CPE devices. It's not as easy to, when you're a large network, to enable V6 as it is when you're a very small network with a few hundred subscribers. Okay? And with UK broadband usage estimated at 22.3 million, it's certainly a large number to think about. I appreciate we just came back from lunch. Just as a straw poll in the room, how many people can browse the IPv6 internet from home? A good number. Okay. Keep your hands up. Okay, can I ask you to put your hands down if that's a tunneled connection either back to a corporate network or via a tunnel broker? Yeah, PPP. Okay, so for the benefits of the webcast, we had a good majority of the room raise their hands, but certainly a good majority dropped down when you mentioned about what's tunneled. So there's clearly V6 access lacking within UK access networks. Now, around the time that this was proposed and this presentation was proposed, a project came to me which was a refresh of a network, a campus LAN effectively, within a business incubator. Now, on that business incubator we have 150 to 200 small companies. Now, we run two networks around that. We have essentially an IP transit type network where we provide raw IP and people put their own CPE devices on there. And we also provide a fully managed network of RSC 1980 in space. Essentially, plug in and go. That's the ideal. So when I came to look at enabling V6 on that network, I thought it would be quite a good idea. So I started having a look in terms of subscribers and our network and so on. Now, as ISPs, we need capable CPEs. So once the bottom actual slide there, which has been cut off in green, is essentially Ethernet. But as soon as you start to move away from Ethernet, you get an awful lot of red boxes. Now, those red boxes are actually from the Right 2012 IPv6 CPE survey, which you can go and access. So you can see it's not as easy when you're a large ISP dealing with lots of different technologies as it would be on a small ISP where you maybe have just Ethernet access. I also started thinking about subscribers. Now, as a techie myself in some respects, and certainly there's a lot level of technical ability within this room, we always want to do the best technical solution we can. We do have to deal with these things called budgets every now and then, which does affect that, but we always want to do that. But sometimes, just because we can do something doesn't necessarily mean we should. And if you're a subscriber, what did those subscribers really want? Now, when you have subscribers where they have a number of devices, such as tablets, mobiles, consoles, 10-year-old PCs, fridges, toilets, that's the latest IPv-enabled thing. I don't know why. Essentially, Internet of Everything, it all just has to work. That's the ideal goal with subscribers. Okay? Now, the question that came to mind here, certainly with the subscribers of the RSC 1918 managed networks, is, do they really want V6? Or does it matter to them, would be a good way to put it. Certainly, one of the things that came out of RIPE's 2013 survey was that one of the perceived reasons for lack of V6 is no market demand. Now, certainly in my day job, we've had a V6 enabled network for quite a while, and I know certainly another ISP that's the same way, and we've had one request. That's it. So is there really a market demand? So the first question I really want to focus in on is essentially the subscriber base and the CPE. So is there really a market demand for our subscribers? Are the subscribers ready for V6 where happy eyeballs may not be achievable in the first instance? And alongside that, are the current CPE devices ready and available to support those? And possibly as an addendum to that, if we think of the obvious support department and the amount of calls we take and the scripts that are in place for v4, are support departments ready for the changing nature of queries? And does that need a higher level of awareness and possibly mindset changes? So I'd like to start by putting that question to Ian.
Well,
Mike.
Oh, sorry.
It's enabled.
Okay. I think the first thing is the CPEs can be made to support this pretty easily. In our case, we supply them, and it's up to us to make it happen. It should not require the subscribers to see the demand, because they aren't supposed to notice. V6 is a technically driven introduction. It's not a new product in its own right, and we need to push it out there as part of both the general future, but a cost of remaining in business and remaining being able to grow.
So is essentially the market demand realistically IPv4 exhaustion rather than a subscriber requirements?
Exhaustion is the killer app. Nothing else drives it there, and actually, in the wider context, exhaustion has driven address sharing in its myriad forms. That's the driver towards V6. Okay. As far as support departments, there is lots of work to do there, making your journeys successful, but again, that's our job.
Okay. Darryl, do you have anything to add to that?
No, I think Ian's obviously covered most of that. I think CPE-wise, it's not really ready yet. I think there's still things missing. One of the big issues is security.
Yeah.
So avoiding misguided views on NAT being secure. V6 firewalls obviously exist. A lot of the routers these days are open source. There's things that can be done. But looking at the various vendors out there, I've not seen that.
Neil?
So I think support's a big challenge for us. We're doing much more complicated things on the network. People just expect it to work. You ping up an iPad and press a button and it should just work. And I think there's a lot of challenges to figure out in that, where things that think they're IPv6 capable turn out they're not, or they pretend they are and then something doesn't work. I think there's a whole lot of learning to go through that. I think on the CPE side, well, there's no demand for us, so why would there be a demand for CPE providers? I mean, it's as simple as that. From a BT point of view, Home Hub 3, the second version of that, Home Hub 4, Home Hub 5, are IPv6 capable boxes. And we've been shipping them out for a while. And actually, largely, I think what Darryl said, most of the routers out there are based on Linux. And Linux has had IPv6 for, I don't know what, almost 10, maybe 15 years. So most of these platforms can do it. You've just got to kind of make it a bit of a priority. And I think, we were talking before this, and actually I think there's a common view about, doing this at the right time. If I look at the previous organisation I worked for, they deployed IPv6 12 years ago, literally on a brand new network. Actually having to rip all that out and do it again because the IPv6 they deployed, no one's taken it. Because no one wanted it, because no one needed it. And I think that's another key issue about the demand. So I completely agree with Ian, exhaustion is the killer app.
Is that an awareness issue or not? Or is it a simple fact there's no killer protocol or service that really requires V6? Or would someone essentially at this point in time be mad to enable such a service if it does require V6?
I think if you're a business whose business is the internet, then you should be preparing for it. If you're selling stuff or you do business over the internet, then it's like if you're a supply chain, you have to make sure all your vans can deliver stuff. We need to make sure all the network can deliver stuff. So I think it's a path of being in business on the internet, and it's kind of like, if you've just bought, the analogy I use, if you've just bought a whole fleet of new Mercedes vans, you don't buy another one in the following month. You buy it when the van needs to be replaced. And I think that's a key thing. I think as techie guys, we just saw it. You know, we've all gone in and built tunnels, super. You know, we generate the demand ourselves because we're technical people, we like to solve problems. So, you know, even in here, the demand does exist, and we've fixed it ourselves. So I've got a tunnel at home as well, which I turn off because it usually upsets my wife. But you know, there is from end users, the simplistic nature of connectivity for them is a web browser or an app or something very simple. It's mostly not logged into a Unix shell, type in traceroute 6. That's not what it is for them.
Okay. Right, that leads nicely into my next phase of the discussion. Around June, July time this year, there was a big headline. One of the ones I picked out was that PlusNet tests IP address sharing as IPv6 fails to take off. This generated quite a lot of debate. There was comments ranging from, you know, as we just said there, V6 fails to take off, to, you know, it's been 10 years, stop being lazy. I think that's perhaps a little bit unfair. But the question comes is Carriergrade NAT a stopgap, or is it a workable solution for identified subscribers? If this is a necessary evil, where exactly is that evil? And if end-to-end is the ideal, will Carriergrade NAT create a two-tier internet? We're already there in some respects, certainly with mobile networks. I started off by putting as the have and the have-nots, and I think this is maybe the wants and the not interested. Another thing that I think is worth mentioning is, are we as ISP and vendors in this room certainly investing too much time in making things work with Carriergrade NAT rather than implementing IPv6? And something, again, I think I pulled out of the Wright report was the general view and acceptance that NAT will solve any problems, especially with the growing use of Carriergrade NAT, which I actually find very scary. So realistically, I'd like to now look at Carriergrade NAT. Now, as I said at the start, this was originally based across a BT presentation on Carriergrade NAT. So what I'm going to do initially is hand over to Neil, who will take you through some slides on BT's implementation and certainly trials and things that they've been looking at.
Great. So, I mean, this is a BT presentation. So I used to kind of sit in lots of technical forums where, you know, people like the Rev would go, "Nah, it's evil," right? And to an extent, he's right. To another extent, he's wrong. Actually, in the early days of the internet, in many ways, NAT kept us running because it reduced the routing table size. And we have, you know, in the 90s. I know that's a dodgy word for many, but back in those days, 32 meg was a huge amount to have in a router, and it cost you 3 months worth of business. So, you know, it is not the best thing in the world, but actually it's not the worst. Whilst this talks to BT, I think my colleagues and the other organisations probably have similar stories. I would be amazed if they didn't. Here's the sad reality. Dualstack doesn't help us. If your strategy is based on a Dualstack solving all of your problems, I'm sorry, you're going to be mistaken. That's a reality. So we can either kind of bury our heads in the technical excellence of, oh, this is no NAT, this is how it must be, or, you know, I've worked in the internet for 20 years, I'm passionate about it, I want it to continue to grow and thrive and be the place to meet and do business and everything else that it does. And for that, we need to be able to keep demand moving whilst we go from one protocol to another protocol. It's as simple as that. CGNAT, and then there's other solutions, it's not the only one. Here we go. CGNAT, there's a bunch of them here, is not the only solution. There's many others. Hands up if you use the internet on a mobile. Oh, I wish the Rev was here actually. You have been using NAT on mobile networks since the internet came to mobile. And yeah, there's a few people who've probably got some tunnel and pretend they have a static IP address. Let me tell you, in the middle of the network, you're using NAT. And the sheer number of devices has driven that, and actually the actual way that 3G networks were designed has also made that requirement. Moving into LTE, that actually doesn't change. And you know, whilst we have lots of fixed users, I think the number of mobile devices is probably bigger than the number of fixed lines now. Seems to work. I don't know. Just got a message, and it's on email. It seems to work. Is it perfect? No. But is anything else perfect? IPv6 world, you know, I think we're facing a lot of unknown challenges. In the same way, over the last 20 years, we've hardened a lot of IPv4 protocols. In summary, IPv4 address sharing is inevitable. It's already happening. You are participating in it right now. Native IPv6, as we move over to it, you know, the trend will swing. Some of you are probably on IPv6 in this room and you don't even know it, because we have IPv6 here as well. That's the goal for us, that people don't even know they're on it. So you're on Google Maps and you're moving the map, looking for the curry house, and you're on IPv6, but you don't know it, because that's not important to you getting to the curry house. So we did a trial, and we've done a couple of trials in BT and in PlusNet. Oops, I've just cocked up, sorry. NAT, let me just open it up. Oops, sorry. Never do an animated presentation. Note to self. I've just done it again. So, surprise, surprise, everything works. Surprise, surprise. Who's surprised? Hands up. Not everything does work, so you're right to be surprised. If you run a server, if you've got your own web server, that doesn't work, right? So if you're like me and you run Plex at home and you like to watch stuff remotely, that's a challenge. I estimate the percentage of those people are probably, in the whole of the UK, are in this room. Yes, you know you're geeks. So when you look at it like that, you think, there are a lot of people out there that this would work for, no problems. And actually, without any big support headache. When we did this test, there's one anecdote. We had a guy phone up to complain that his mate had somehow been opted into our trial. Not him, his mate, because his Xbox would slow down. Actually, his Xbox wasn't affected at all. It just worked. So it is great, and you know, Nintendo just launched a console, Wii U. It doesn't do IPv6. They only launched it this year. It's probably got a shelf life of about a year now because it's not selling too well, but there's still a lot of stuff coming out in the world that doesn't support IPv6, much to my amazement. I understand Xbox, the new one, the new PlayStation support IPv6, which is great news. But these apps are important to people. It's what they do with their life. So, lots of things work. A few tiny things in specialized areas don't, and they're manageable. Oh, yeah, you've got a server at home because you watch Plex. You don't need to use CGNAT. All you do is buy from Amazon and you're online. Yeah, CGNAT will work for you. So, transition looks like this. Pretty obvious. We do a bit of IPv4, we run out, we share a bit of IPv4, we move people over to IPv6. Job done. We continue to make money, pay bills, and invest in training and all the great network stuff we build, and the world rotates. Sounds like a no-brainer to me. That's it.
Thanks, Neil. Just as a question there, Neil. Could you do Dualstack with Carriergrade NAT from the v4 side and a real IP address from the v6 side?
I think there are many ways of doing that. I suggest you try what's best for your organisation. Yeah.
Okay. Ian, do you have anything to add to that? You know, BSkyB have done some quite extensive trials with this as well.
Oops. Sorry.
Oh dear.
I've just knocked over Ian's bottle of gin.
Well, apart from that last bit, I would fully support everything that Neil has said there. The general aspects of it. The fact that CGN really does work for almost everything. It's really only oddball GRE and almost dead IPsec world things and inbound services. And there are some mitigations even for those. But how much money do you want to spend on that tiny edge case? Especially since you can probably take those subscribers out of it if you have a sane way of doing it. The gotcha with that is what happens when everyone decides they want out because they've heard it's bad.
Yeah.
So you have to have a plan for that. The other wider thing is that if CGNAT works so well, why would you bother with V6, or why would you bother with V6 in a hurry? And the simple answer is I don't want to make the case to my management for spending on 2, 3, 4 terabits worth of CGNAT equipment. That alone is enough reason to justify all the expenditure and effort of getting there.
Is there an additional cost here as well in terms of, we look at various requests from various law enforcement agencies, so obviously we have to log data and be able to trace back IPs to subscribers. Doesn't that add a huge potential logging overhead when carrier-grade NAT is enabled?
Potentially, but it depends what approach and design you take. Yep. There are ways to minimise that and end up with something that doesn't look too dissimilar to the current non-shared address world. Yeah. The important thing for the wider internet is people have to learn they have to start supplying ports as well as an IP and a timestamp when they're reporting abuse or making other things, and that's true for everybody, whether you run CGN or not, because someone somewhere will be.
Yes, very true. Darryl, have Virgin Media looked into carrier-grade NAT within the Virgin Media network?
Sorry, saying?
Has Virgin Media looked into carrier-grade NAT?
Yes, so at the moment on our TiVo set-top boxes, they are all sat behind a NAT, so excuse me, in very similar way to what Neil was saying with the mobile. It's outbound connection only, it's retrieving content, so it really doesn't make any difference.
Related to one of the comments that Neil made, regarding content and things like that, do content delivery networks really need to go through carrier-grade NAT? Could we re-architect the network where we bring content delivery networks inside the carrier-grade NAT, for want of better terms?
Yeah, putting CDN behind a NAT is probably a really bad thing to do. You're putting a lot of money into scaling the NAT up to cope with that traffic that's just local. There's no reason why you can't put it in front of on the customer side of the NAT.
Okay, good stuff. Okay, I'd like to move on now to V6 and specifically the path that our panel are taking towards implementing V6 and getting out to the access level. Things that I've just quickly picked up on there is, first of all, obviously you have to enable V6 transit and enable your V6 and web and ISP services, mail and things like that. That's possibly the easiest thing to do. You then have to enable the core and move onwards towards the access layer. So I'm going to start with Darryl on this one, because I know that Virgin Media have been doing the more recent V6 trials. How is IPv6 within Virgin Media progressing?
Progressing. Transit side of things, I mean, even the core. From a network perspective, V6 is not difficult. It's something that requires time and effort to configure. Obviously, lots of testing with that as well. But that end of things, there's not really that many challenges there. For us, I guess the access layer is the more complicated part, and the CPE. Yeah. So again, DOCSIS network. A lot of the older CPE, which is DOCSIS 1, won't do V6. DOCSIS physically won't carry that. DOCSIS, very aptly named 2 plus IPv6, and DOCSIS 3 do support V6. Yeah. And so, I mean, the majority of our CPE is now on DOCSIS 3. Yeah. Firmware-wise, it's not out there yet. It's that's a work in progress.
Yeah. Actually, it's worth mentioning at this point, one of the things that I was going to mention in terms of V6 CPE is, in case people aren't aware, there's currently an IETF working group called HomeNet, which is specifically regarding how we do V6 in the access layer in terms of CPE devices. That, I believe, which I had an update today, is currently in the ratification and review process. And then once we get through that and deal with comments and so on, I believe then it will start to come out. And that's maybe when we'll see a big uplift in CPE vendors on different standards. Same question, I would guess, to Andy. How are BSkyB looking to enable V6? Sorry, Ian.
Well, we started our program about a year ago when the case of CGN had been dealt with, and that was the driver. Thankfully, a lot of the tipping point of the big content moving first means that it's actually quite viable that you will get a high volume of V6 the day you turn it on. Exact percentages will vary, but at least a quarter, edging to a half, depends exactly what home devices are. But we have test images for our supported CPE that are going through. We'll be trialling that next year, and we'll launch when it's ready. There isn't a fixed date. If we find that there are issues with it, we'll make sure we wait until it's right. But we fully expect to do it before we do any CGN in anger. And that's one of the things that I think is quite an important aspect to this. Yeah. As far as one of the other things that has been said before about deploying this years ago and all the rest, I think it's really important to understand, certainly for subscriber termination and various other functions at large scale, the kit just hasn't been there until maybe 18, 24 months ago. Yeah. And that's the point when you can start investigating, designing and planning for deployment. For us, if we'd have rolled it out any earlier, we'd have really got egg on our face. Yes. The CPE side could have been driven faster, but without that, now's the time when the planets align and it's actually viable to do it with the correct amount of rigour.
Yeah, it's something I would certainly tend to agree with, and what I alluded to earlier. Doing it on a small scale is actually relatively straightforward. It's once you try and scale it up, then it becomes interesting. Neil, do you have any comments?
Yeah, I mean, I think I echo a lot of what Ian said. As I mentioned earlier, our home hubs are V6 capable now. We're building a platform called MSC that many of you may be aware of. That's IPv6 enabled.
Is your mic on?
It should be. Is it on? Hello? Sorry. Our home hubs, our recent home hubs are IPv6 enabled. We have a lot in the field that aren't as well, so that's a challenge we have to face into at some point. As Ian said, from a broadband access platform point of view, there hasn't been anything that could really cope with big volumes of IPv6 and actually stay up. And when you lose a broadband access server, 50,000 people are typically affected. Your help desk lights up like a Christmas tree, so you tend to be very cautious when you make changes to that platform. If you're a BT Net customer, corporate customer who buys BT internet from us, you've been able to have IPv6 for over a year now. So where we've been able to do it in a scalable, workable solution, we've actually turned it on. Most of the core network for internet's IPv6 enabled, and we're working to roll out the rest of it. I think from sometime next year, the capability will be ready. I think it'll be up to our product guys as to when they actually just launch it. But again, with Ian, what I've said to them is, we can't do CGNAT until we've got IPv6 running. They have to kind of go at the same time, because I think it's important that you have that path to reduce the challenge the challenges that CGNAT may bring to us. I still think there's a lot of gotchas that we don't know about to figure out, with random devices, random security issues, user issues. It's going to be a painful struggle.
There's only so much you can essentially put into a test environment. You have to do large-scale enablement of essentially V6 to really see these issues. And there is initiatives around there to test happy eyeballs on networks that have been enabled. But until we actually really enable it properly, that's maybe when we'll see exactly what the problems are going to be. That's pretty much all we had. Is there any questions from the audience? Sorry, can you stand up? Can we get a...
No, we want to hear you sing the question using the microphone.
I was just really
Sorry, can you state your name and affiliation, please?
I'm Emily Taylor, consultant. I'm actually next up, so it's a bit unfair really to speak, but just a question on I was really interested in your comments on your tests for CGN and that applications work fine. Will you be publishing the results of those tests?
I think there is from a BT point of view, I think we are going to publish them at some point in time. I'll probably need to fight with 16 marketing guys to do it though, but I think we're going to, I mean, we've published it here to an extent, and I think over time we published it. I think there's one thing I just want to say, I'm going to kind of jump in. What we need from you guys, you are the community, we are the guys that make the internet work in this country and beyond. You need to buy into this, because if you don't buy into it, none of our customers are going to buy into it. So when you walk out of here and all your kind of religious stuff about NAT, you need to park it, because you are not the users. And you kind of need to go out there and evangelize. Actually, this is a piece in time we need to go through to get to the end result. And I think that's really important.
Thanks, Neil. Any further questions?
It's great to hear all work is going on.
Sorry, can you...
Christian Larinaga.
Thank you.
When, I think, is probably the question most people are going to be asking quietly. If you're a content provider or you are a service provider of one sort or another, or just a user, business user, it's good to hear BT have been putting V6 out actually quietly for business lines. What about more generally? Are we going to see V6 available, do you think, for the users?
Well, I can say that we expect a trial, and if the trial works the way we want it to, we will also launch next year. It's not a commitment, but it's more than an aspiration.
Yeah. It's something to remember here, guys, is the people that we have on stage are engineers, they're not product people, they're not the people who will push that fully to market, for want of better terms.
Me and Ian have just been insulted, we're architects.
Sorry. I'm sorry, Neil.
I think, Christian, I think the one thing that would be bad is for us to launch it and it doesn't work, or we have issues. Yeah. I think that would be a nightmare for us, because then we back out, and then you know, things like CGNAT will be around forever. So I think, to Ian's point, totally agree with him. You know, we are absolutely, you know, our businesses require us to do this. It's not a choice. You know, all of us here publish how many users have we got, and that's linked to how many IP addresses we've got. Yeah. One thing I have to say though, I think the registries haven't been as helpful as they could have been. They've predicted the doom forever, but we're still actually able to get IPv4 addresses from the RIPE NCC today. So I don't know what we can do to improve that, because, you know, ultimately that's what decides it. And then, you know, you look at Asia, who's allegedly ran out. You know, there isn't some sort of doom going on in that region where they've all fallen off the internet. So I think that, you know, it's all about getting the message right, and I think we've maybe got the message wrong a little bit.
Yeah.
Maybe I misunderstood, but I thought what you were saying, the reason why the problem exists and why we have to use CGNs at the moment is primarily because we just simply don't have enough IPv4 left for transition as originally designed. Yeah. So that shortage is built in. Yeah. So
we've known about the shortage since we started this business.
Right.
Yeah, it's not a surprise to anyone, but we've kind of been predicting it. I don't know how many presentations where I've said the doomsday is this day. Yeah. The reality, it hasn't happened.
It will at one point.
And one of the other aspects is throughout the whole shebang, from CIDR through NAT and the CPE, CGN, and various other things, and just farming efficiency out of your platform, people have done lots of things that have delayed the evil day, and it's been remarkably successful.
Yeah, that's true.
It's just that is not infinite, and we're starting to see just how finite it is. And it does vary from provider to provider, exactly what your timeline is, but actually I think it's going to end up clumping quite closely together.
Okay, we've got time for one final question, so I'm going to pick on Tim. There's two more, sorry. Yeah. For quick.
Flip a coin.
So, Tim Chain, I'm interested in your comments that it hasn't been proven on a more large scale, given Comcast, for example, in the States have over 3 million customers IPv6 enabled out of about 18 million, I believe. They're also very active in the home networking group that you mentioned within the IETF about being able to deploy home networks where services into the home are going to become possible, and that opens potentially new markets and opportunities for services to sell that are currently inhibited by the evil NAT or whatever you want to call it. And I think that's potentially a very interesting thing. And I think that the other point I would make is it's very disappointing that the UK, there was a release last week saying it's 20th or 24th in Europe out of however many countries there are in Europe in terms of IPv6 readiness. And I think that's just kind of a sad thing.
Yeah, I'd just like to answer that. So I think Comcast, you know, if you're a user of that, you might want to ask them how it was for them.
Well, they have lost 400,000 customers, I believe, in the last year. But
Oh,
whether those
really?
are the IPv6 ones, who knows? But
so you know, I think
they
it's
have
easy,
deployed
it's easy
large
to
scale.
roll. Oh, we've done this technically great thing, but all my and here's our big prize. But all my users are pissed off and they've left. We don't want to do that. That's the wrong answer for our customers. I think in terms of the home networking point, I think that is a very good point. If you look at what's going on in Korea, in particular with home networking, where they're selling all sorts of interesting products, that's another one of the drivers for us.
Okay. We'll close that question off there. One more very quick question.
Jan George, Internet Society. So I'm interested in this report that you said that you will publish at some point in time. And I understand that you will probably publish in the report all the beautiful things that are working to make your users more comfortable with this. But this is not what I'm interested in. I'm interested in learning from you what breaks and what does not work, how much you need to invest over the years in scaling, if the CGN scales, to putting more hardware in that big states machine. And I would really like to learn from the big deployment how much that actually costs.
Sorry,
I was going to say, not to disagree with you, because obviously, yeah, I'm keen to see V6 going out there, and I'm keen to not see NAT happening. But the whole thing here is certainly from our three's perspective, it's consumer market. 99.9% of those consumers don't know nor care about how it gets there. They want Facebook to work. They want their internet shopping to work.
Well, I don't care about what users think. What I care, what I care is
Can we give this man
what
a
you
badge?
think. The operators. What is the cost to the operator to operate Carriergrade NAT through the years?
Can I maybe answer that slightly differently? So what is the cost if we don't do it? It's pretty significant, because we can't grow our user bases, we can't make more money, we can't invest in fibre and all this other great stuff that we're doing. So there's a cost of doing it and not doing it. I think you've maybe missed the point. We're not saying you do NAT and it's here forever. We are absolutely not saying that. It's here for a point in time. I wish, as I'm sure my colleagues do, we could say it starts on Friday and finishes next week. I wish that was the case. Unfortunately, there are some massive websites today, massive ones, that aren't IPv6 enabled either. Massive ones. But there's tiny ones. There's, you know, your granddad probably watches, you know, goldfishing.com. And those guys aren't on IPv6, but people don't, oh, IPv6, what's that rubbish? I just want to get to my goldfish website, right? So you got to think, you know, that's why you need to be the evangelist and say, actually, these guys have got a plan, they're working on it. It's not ideal, it's not perfect by any means, but we are where we are. We probably should have considered some of those transitional things when we designed the protocol, and I think that was a massive mistake. And we need to get to a point where it's done. And what won't help us is a fear that stops us from moving forward. And that's kind of, you saw the headline. I mean, it's just absolute rubbish, is my quote on it. We need to be realistic about where we are.
Well,
Okay.
what I would be interested in is actually the financial mechanics of the whole story from the start to the end, so others can learn. I will be talking later about best current operational practices, and I also think this experience could be documented as an operational document, so other operators could learn from this if they are. If they are to go into the idea of CGN or not.
One of the things I would say there is it's quite unlikely we're going to put a lot of effort into telling everybody our cost base.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, surely not, Ian.
was
I'd
gonna
really
say-
like to know that.
So,
I think
so
it's
the-
something that we'd all like to know, but unfortunately we're out of time, so if you do need to pick that up, then maybe we can take that up offline. I'd just like to finish by thanking our panel, Neil, Ian and Daryl for today, and we'll move on.
Good man.